certainly our belief and our cry of don't be boring is founded in the fundamentals that you should start with creative, not finish with creative. And I think in digital often you start with the targeting and then the technology and you end up with the creative. And we're trying to say you should start with the creative because that has the most impact on the success of any campaign. And you
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to yet another edition of the Pure Digital Passion Podcast with me, Moses Kemibaro. My guest today is Paul Thompson, the Chief Commercial Officer of Eskimi, a digital side platform or demand side platform dealing in digital advertising with a very significant footprint globally, 40 markets globally, and more importantly, significant in Kenya, markets like Nigeria, and also South Africa on the African continent. Thank you for joining us, Paul.
Thank you for having me, Moses.
Yeah, so Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, maybe just to give us a sense or a flavor of who Paul is.
So listen, first thing is I'm old enough to remember when creative and media were the same thing. It was they were like together
Before they separated, yeah?
Before they separated, and I think we're seeing a trend where media and creative, or certainly media ideation and media buying, is coming back together again in almost that full service model, which has basically separated over the last 20 years, and hopefully it will come back together again.
And I think maybe to the point of why you're in Nairobi and why this is so important for Eskimi is because there's this reunification happening, because I think we have to think about the entire customer journey when it comes to advertising and marketing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly our belief and our cry of don't be boring is founded in the fundamentals that you should start with creative, not finish with creative. And I think in digital often you start with the targeting and then the technology and you end up with the creative. And we're trying to say you should start with the creative because that has the most impact on the success of any campaign.
And I think it goes back to this point that I think for many years, this need to drive conversions, seeing very attributable results from campaigns, has meant that there's sort of a shift towards the science and less of the art, right?
Well, it's led to gamification of the entire digital ecosystem, because what you're doing is your conversions are being driven by what a computer tells you. And if you put creative at the beginning of the process and you focus on attention, you're bringing humans back into the aspects. So you're driving human change rather than change that a computer can track and monitor. The other part of chasing conversions is you're wasting a huge opportunity. You're spending a huge amount of your budget in a very wasteful way. And the reason being is because less than 2%, between 2% and 10% of clicks end in the sale. And so even being generous, 90% of clicks have no value at all. And if they have no value at all, and then you have to look at what's going on in the ecosystem with ad blockers and ad blindness and all of those trends that we're seeing with consumers being switched off from engaging in ads. And you've got to look at what we've done historically to drive that, and that's part of the problem. So putting creative back at the beginning should help consumers engage more with the ads, not less.
So tell us specifically how you see Eskimi solving that problem, because I think it is a significant problem. You talked about ad blockers. Consumers are a little bit wary when they see ads of maybe poor quality. Tell us how Eskimi specifically is addressing those issues.
Well, I mean, the don't be boring positioning is all about, it's a much bigger part of our culture, but it's all about challenging clients to think more deeply about what they're trying to achieve through creativity in acknowledgement. And there's a huge body of evidence emerging now that actually it's the creative more than anything else that drives the impact. So all the other things that have been going on in digital over the years, hyper-targeting, the obsession around data, the obsession around interaction on the screen, have actually been largely the wrong things to do, and creative's been ignored. So putting creative front and center should drive value, should drive better success for the clients, and should deliver better results.
So have you seen any specific examples, maybe some campaigns where you've sort of seen this thesis validated, where good creative does result in better campaign performance?
Yeah, so Kantar produced a big piece of research that said 70% of a campaign's effectiveness in the branding space was delivered by the creative alone. So nothing to do with the targeting, nothing to do with the optimization, just purely the creative. And I think there's an increasing body of evidence to suggest that it's the creative that finds the audience rather than you defining the audience. And the way that we define audiences within the digital space is slightly divorced from how you would do it in traditional media, where you had these broad audiences, you put the creative in traditional media, the creative did all of the heavy lifting. We've always expected in digital, since the very first ad, that the targeting would do the heavy lifting and the effort wouldn't be really placed on the creative. And we're trying to say, place the effort on the creative, that will deliver the success in your campaign.
Are you facing any challenges or issues when it comes to sort of shifting that perspective with the advertisers and the clients that you deal with so that they start paying a little bit more attention to some of these elements?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, Africa's a really good example. A lot of the markets we operate in are very performance driven, and trying to connect the reason why you would do creative to the entire campaign. So I think branding plays this. I mean, there's lots of evidence in traditional media that branding plays a significant role in ultimately driving your conversions, because it's the classic drive awareness, drive consideration, you know, the purchase funnel, drive appreciation of the brand all the way through to purchase. And that's what we're trying to say. It's not separated. It should all be connected. You know, if you do a great branding campaign, that has an effect on your performance campaigns as well. It improves your conversion metrics, but you need to look at it holistically. And I think certainly in some markets, it's very divorced. It's very price sensitive. And we know that price has no correlation to value or delivery in terms of success.
Are there any specific nuances you've seen in your role as the Chief Commercial Officer with regards to how, you know, the evolution is happening with programmatic and advertising in Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, the African continent? Any things that you see that are somewhat endemic to this region, and how you're able to address them as Eskimi?
I mean, it's a good question. I keep getting asked, you know, like, what's my opinion? What are the differences? And there are, generally speaking, the technology is there. The technology works in the same way. You know, whatever we see as trends, particularly things like attention, they're rapidly spread. You know, like the number of conversations I've had in Africa around attention it's the same as the ones I was having a year ago in London.
Okay.
It's like those global trends of what matters spread very quickly. You know, the platforms are global. We're a global company. We like to think locally, so that's the important part. So we have a global perspective, but local people that can give us guidance on the ground, and that's super important when you're thinking about cultural nuances, publishers that you work with, and creative.
So coming back to this Don't Be Boring campaign that you're launching here in Nairobi in Kenya today, can you tell us a little bit more about what that means in terms of, as a milestone, as a key moment, in terms of how Eskimi is transforming its business, its proposition for the marketplace in Kenya and the rest of Africa?
So, I mean, when we were thinking about the concept of Don't Be Boring, we wanted something that was relevant across the entire company and across every market that we operate in. And we operate in very diverse, very wonderful markets. All of our markets that we operate in are super fast growing. So if you look to some of the markets from previous roles, like UK and France and Germany, they're like basic anemic single-digit growth at the moment. Digital is pretty saturated in those markets. The budgets aren't going to grow significantly. In fact, there's quite a lot of cannibalization because there's new entrants like retail media and Amazon and TikTok.
Keeps fragmenting, yeah?
It sort of fragments a little bit, but then it's really consolidated into like 4 or 5 big platforms.
Okay.
But actually, if I look at the markets that we're in, and Africa is a good example, these are super fast growing markets, partly because there's still quite a lot of traditional media spend. Super creative markets because of all of the different cultures that you see across the continent. And clients are now at that stage where they can see what's going on in other markets, and they can see their colleagues in Europe spending more and more on digital, so it must be working.
Yeah.
And they're now trying to figure out that switch and shift more budget. So it's a great place to be. More budgets shifting into digital. And Don't Be Boring is our rallying cry to clients. This is your opportunity to really change the way that you've thought about digital, and to challenge yourselves, as we would want you to deliver great campaigns.
Tell us a little bit about the creative capabilities of your platform today, because in my earlier conversation with Vitus, your CEO, he talked about the fact that you're kind of looking at it end to end, thinking about the whole customer journey. So really from the top of the funnel where we're looking at awareness all the way to conversion. Maybe tell us a little bit about what your platform is able to do when you're addressing creativity. Because I think one of the things that I know about looking at Eskimi ads here in Kenya is that they usually have these very interactive elements, something that, you can interact with. It sort of spins, it turns, and it generally catches your attention. But what else can, customers expect in the platform in terms of actually creating the creative, or the fact that I think you have an in-house studio that actually serves your clients' creative needs?
Yeah, so we have we talk about technology a lot, but we have an in-house team of people, actual humans, who do create. And we've invested in a team of creatives that can think creatively about a brand, that can think about innovation, and of course they're that interesting blend of sort of creatives and technologists.
Yes,
because they have to code and they have to think about the digital publishers that we're going to work with. They have to think about high impact ads that are not annoying.
Left brain, right brain.
Yeah. So it's a good mix. So we've got the people in place. We obviously try and spread that across all of the markets and take learnings from all of the markets. Like Nigeria is different to Kenya. Lithuania is different to Bulgaria. So we try and take the best of all of the market learnings. We're always on the look for who's doing really interesting creative work. We're always challenging clients to do that. And then we build that into the platform. So as Vida said earlier, we start with the creative process. We think about how technology can enhance that. We think about the publishers, the data that we have, and how that is all packaged up for clients in order to deliver branded success. The starting process, actually, after the creative, before we even go live with the campaign, I think Vitas touched on it, is we work with a neuroscience company to analyze the ads as a human would see those ads before they've even gone live, to make recommendations on how to improve those ads, how to make the messaging simpler in some cases, stand out a little bit more. It's quite interesting. We actually ran our own branding campaign, and "Don't be boring" was actually one of the taglines that caught the most attention.
Oh, really?
So we're in the right space.
Did some A/B testing there.
We did some A/B. We ate our own dog food. We do the neuroscience. The neuroscience comes back with recommendations. And again, it's a global standard of neuroscience. It's a company that's working with lots of other brands to design ads that are impactful and not wasteful. And then we measure it at the very end of the campaign with, again, globally recognized attention standards. And we've moved away from, well, I'm hoping we're going to move away much more this year. We've moved away from that conversation around, this is measured by a computer, it's a click. This is measured by a computer, it's viewable. And none of that really means anything, because it's not actually looking at what a human's doing. And that's where attention is really starting to open up the debate around what's important in digital, which is, has a human seen it? How long have they seen it? Have they seen it long enough for it to have that effect on the part of the brain that makes you fall in love with a brand and do something like go and buy it? And we know that, creativity adds that brand equity, and it's that brand equity which is valuable to CMOs, and it's what ultimately changes the consumer's perception to a brand.
It's so funny, as a digital marketing practitioner myself, there's always almost been this war between traditional and digital, seen as almost adversaries when it comes to campaigns and activities. In fact, historically, especially in a market like Kenya, you'd find that traditional media would still get at least 80% of the media spend in terms of budgets.
Yeah.
And we've always been like, hang on, we can deliver better value. We've got the science, we've got the attribution, we can tell you what's working. But it feels to me like almost going back to first principles of marketing, first principles of branding, in terms of how do you create that emotional connection? How do you speak to the human? How do you create emotional resonance? And then somehow package that within a digital experience. It seems to me that that's where things are going again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I had a very interesting conversation with a CEO of an agency in Nairobi who said exactly that. And it's almost like I'm old enough to remember when it was full service. It's almost like we're going back to what used to be considered normal practice. You do the creative, you think about your audience, you think about the channel. The channels, and again, we talk about channel planning, we talk about omni-channel a lot, but actually, if you look at it, as you just said, there's this big divide. I'm not sure the agencies are really connecting digital with traditional, because it should be one. It's like what's
one holistic thing, yeah.
Of course. What is the role of your traditional media within the plan, and how is digital going to support that and amplify it? What's your lead medium? Now, we talk about digital a lot. Digital is now the dominant way that people consume media, right? Whether it's through your phone or through your laptop, through a streaming service, whether it's the time you spend on social networks. Interestingly, actually, 2/3 of your time is still spent on the open web, on public publishers. So that's where people are spending their time. That's where the eyeballs are. That's where you should focus your attention. But equally, fitting it all together, considering how digital is going to enhance your traditional media plan, how digital is also going to be sequenced, which is something that we're going to start to educate clients on. Is like, what's the sequencing of your story? Because traditionally, it's like one message.
Yeah.
And actually, you can use multiple messages if you sequence them correctly within digital.
So much is changing. So much is evolving. What do you see as the way forward? Thinking out, 2 to 5 years at Eskimi, the plans you have, and of course, today you're sort of having a key moment when you're going to speaking to the industry, the advertisers, the brands about this "don't be boring" approach. What do you see going forward from here in the next 2 to 5 years?
I mean, it's a brilliant question. I mean, if we get our plans right, we'll continue to invest in all of these wonderful markets, and we'll continue to support clients on this journey from maybe not thinking about creative in the way that we think about creative, so help them think about creative, but more importantly, prove that creative adds value over and above just doing it because you want to be more creative and have something that's high impact. It actually has demonstrable, monetizable value. You get more back, you get better ROI by doing it. I think a lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing is bringing this end-to-end creative and measurement frameworks to markets, and proving that attention is more valuable than a click. I think that's certainly going to be something that we're going to be focusing on. And I think, as the business evolves, we'll evolve with the market supporting our clients. I think over the next 5 years, there's a lot happening. Like we probably haven't even touched on it. It's like, what role is AI going to play within the Eskimi business? And we're starting to experiment a lot with AI across every aspect of the business, including engineering. But we're also thinking about how does it improve creative? How does it improve creative thinking, ideation? How does it improve the way that we come about planning campaigns? Like defining a target audience. How do we think about potentially at some point utilizing AI to produce those sequences of creative? Wow. But it's very early days, and I know that there's always a danger of overestimating the short-term impact and underestimating the long-term impact. So I think AI will have a much bigger effect in 5 years' time than it will have immediately. But it's super exciting to be at the beginning and start to experiment with and think about how it's going to make our business more effective for our clients.
So thinking about all these new evolutions and changes and transitions that are now happening, both within Eskimi and globally, because I think you've attributed quite a bit to this attention economy or attention moment that is so critical. What would you give, or what would you impart to our marketing practitioners, our brands, the people who are in charge of campaigns? What are some of the things that you think they should keep in mind with all this evolution that's happening, not to mention AI sort of coming into the stack as well?
So, I mean, what I would say is, look, attention is a hugely valuable commodity. There's a brilliant book I read recently, which is called Stolen Focus, which just talks about how basically your attention has been stolen by all of the other things that are going on, like social networks being gamified to constantly grab you, those little dopamine effects that you have when you get an update, and that human attention is actually shrinking.
Oh, literally, they don't have space anymore.
Well, they're so used to having that 50-second snack or 10-second snack. So for us, it's a dwindling commodity that we need to manage properly. And I think marketeers have been guilty of maybe abusing it a little bit with the way that ads have been deployed, not just on social networks, but right across the open internet. And so that's something I think will become definitely something that I think will change. I think that will definitely change. I think the other thing that I think I'd say to marketers is the way that you've done things traditionally is not the way you should do things in the future. Right? whichever market you're in, it's undoubtedly the web, the open web as we know it, is becoming a little bit more private. There's a lot more legislation in. Consumers are becoming far more aware of the data exchange that they're giving away. And that's why creative is going to be even more important, because it's going to be the single biggest driver to your audience, because your audience is going to a degree, fragment, change, disappear because of those signals that are going to be gone.
And maybe as we come to the end of our conversation, are there any last words, advice, recommendations, any thoughts you'd like to share with your audience? And I think particularly looking at it through the Eskimi lens, and then thinking about, Kenya, the rest of Africa, anything that you think would be critical for them to know?
For me personally, I think, Africa's going to go through a period of growth. I think it's had promise in the past. I think it's now actually here and now. It's going to go through that period of growth, and it's going to be a period of sustained growth. I'm very confident that that's going to happen. All of the conversations that I've had, the thinking around brands, the clients that I've met, the level of intelligence and the level of thinking, the level of ambition is here without a shadow of a doubt. And it's the conversations that I'm having are the same conversations you would be having with practitioners in London. It's the same. People are thinking about it. It's an amazing market. It's more vibrant. I think there's probably, if I'm honest, a little bit more flexibility with the clients here, because they can get away with stuff. They can do a little bit more. They can do a little bit more testing.
You can experiment. Yeah.
Kenya's a great market. We had a conversation yesterday with a senior client at one of the telcos, and Kenya's the experimentation for the whole of Africa.
It's a petri dish.
Yeah, it is exactly that. It's the experimentation market, and I think that's wonderful, because we can do some really great work. You can experiment, and by its very nature, experimentation means you're going to have some successes and some failures. But I think everyone will tell you learn a lot for the next time out of failure, probably not a lot about success.
Yeah.
And the more you experiment, the more you're going to build up that sort of portfolio of knowledge. But yeah, it's again, my experience has been absolutely wonderful. The conversations that I'm having, especially around media and creative coming back, are like fantastic, because I think they should never have divorced, unfortunately.
Yeah, and of course, I think it's so funny that, the fragmentation happens, there are these two camps, but now they have to talk to each other, they have to shake hands, and they've got to make this whole customer journey work in a seamless and sort of uninterrupted way. I think for me, the other thing I just want to mention is that I think Kenya is really indeed correct, a very unique market. There are these nuances, like the way, for instance, internet uptake, the way we use our mobile devices, mobile money has flourished here like no other part of the world. We have an audience or a market that is very digitally accepting, or endemic almost. I don't know how it happened, but yeah, it's a great place to do stuff.
Yeah, but it's born out of necessity, and it's born out of experimentation. And you're right, like mobile payments started in Africa.
Yeah.
Like we think about these big global companies like that do mobile payments, but actually most of them were copying models that were already
in place,
in place in here. And I think, and again, this is one, again, from a purely UK standpoint, and actually if you look at what some of the noise that's coming from the US, that our markets are heavily regulated, and that stifles innovation. And I think maybe the looser regulation here is encouraging this sort of entrepreneurship, creativity. As a general observation, it's going to drive change and growth. And I truly think you'll see some of the next biggest companies in the world, certainly in the digital space, will come from here.
I'm completely convinced it's going to happen. Paul, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been a pleasure. As you say, again, don't be boring. And we're delighted to see what Eskimi is going to do with your launch today here. But more importantly, I think going forward into 2025, working with the clients, working with the market to bring all the new innovations and capabilities on your platform to them. And of course, if there's anything else you'd like to share with the audience, please tell us what they can expect from Kenya and Africa going forward.
Well, it all starts with the clients, right? Yeah. It starts with the CMOs, and it starts with the agency clients, and it starts with our relationships. And that relationship is, they have to trust us to deliver honest, consultative work back to them, and we have to be open and honest, and in some ways challenge them to do that work.
Yeah.
And we, in some cases, disagree with their approach and try and show them a better way of, or certainly from our perspective, a better way of doing this, digital advertising, making it more creative, making it not boring.
And of course, being very collaborative in the process.
It's all about collaboration.
Yeah.
It's never about conflict. It's all about collaboration.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we'll have you once again on this podcast.
Oh, I'll definitely come back.
Awesome. So there you've heard it from Paul Thompson, the Chief Commercial Officer of Eskimi, who's really given us some key insights into what their business is doing from a commercial perspective, but more importantly, looking at all the nuances and the aspects around what makes Eskimi so relevant for the Kenyan, East African, and the Pan-African market. So thank you very much for joining us in this conversation, and we'll catch you in the next one.